advise me we have a quorum. And I'll call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 41 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Human Resources, Skills, Social Development, and the Status of Persons with Disabilities. Today's meeting is again taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June the 23rd, 2022. People will be appearing remotely using Zoom, as well as those assembled here in the committee room. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witness and members. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. For those participating virtually, please use the raised hand icon. Before speaking, click on the microphone icon to activate your own mic. For those in the room, it will be controlled by the Proceedings and Verifications Officer. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. You may speak in either official language of your choice. If a translation is interrupted, please get my attention. We'll suspend while it is being corrected. I would remind all participants when the meeting is in progress, no screenshots shall be taken. Bill C-22, an act to reduce poverty and to support the financial security of persons with disabilities by establishing the Canada Disability Benefit and making a consequential amendment to the Income Tax Act. Pursuant to order of Tuesday, October the 18th, 2022, the committee will commence its study of Bill C-22, an act to reduce poverty, to support the financial security of persons with disabilities by establishing the Canada Disability Benefit and making a consequential amendment to the Income Tax Act. I would like to take a moment to remind those participating in today's meeting, as well as those observing the proceedings in person and on video, that the committee adopted a motion on October the 24th that included instructions for the clerk to explore options to allow for the full participation of all witnesses and members of the public in the context of consideration of Bill C-22 in planning. Inclusive and accessible meetings. The committee has made arrangements for sign language interpretation in both American Sign Language and Quebec Sign Language for those witnesses appearing in person and by Zoom, and for those in our audience. The sign language interpreters are being video recorded to be incorporated into the archived video recording of the proceedings that will be made available at a later date on Parleview via the committee's website. To assist the interpreters in their work, I kindly ask all members and witnesses appearing today to introduce themselves when speaking and to speak slowly. Finally, if a member of the audience requires assistance at any time, please notify a member of the staff of the committee clerk. I would like to inform all members that the witness appearing virtually today have completed the technical test to check their connectivity and equipment and verification for interpretation in both official languages. I would like to welcome our witnesses to begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks. Of course, we have the pleasure of appearing with us in the room today of the Honourable Carla Qualtrough, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Disability Inclusion. Departmental staff, Alexis Conrad, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Income Security and Social Development Branch and Policy Horizons Canada. Krista Wilcox, appearing virtually, Director General, Office for Disabilities Issue. We'll start with Minister Qualtrough for 5 minutes, at which time I will open the floor for questioning to the member. Madame Gray.
Point of order, just before we begin, I just wanted to confirm that we had the first slate of witnesses, including the Minister, for the entire hour, just because we're starting late because of the vote that we had.
Yes, it would be my intention that the committees and the Minister just signified. Yes. Thank you, Ms. Gray. Madame Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour aux membres du comité.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee members. I'd like to thank the committee for its work to create a more inclusive country for persons with disabilities. And thanks to all parties for their support of Bill C-22 at its second reading.
Legislation that is very straightforward. both in its objective and its format. Bill C-22 would create the new Canada Disability Benefit, a monthly supplemental income payment modeled after the GIS that would be paid directly to working-age, low-income persons with disabilities. The objectives of C-22 are poverty reduction and financial security. The harsh reality is that working-age persons with disabilities in Canada are twice as likely to live in poverty as those without. Approximately 1 in 4 working-age persons with disability lives below the poverty line. Many persons with disability in Canada experience a modest level of financial security for the first time in their adult lives when they turn 65 and have access to OAS and GIS. The poverty level drops by over 60% for persons with disabilities between the ages of 64 and 65, from 23% to 9%. I know you all agree that's unacceptable. Not the poverty drop, by the way, the fact that it was 23%. The Canada Disability Benefit would be established and implemented through C-22, which is the legal framework to create the benefit, and a subsequent public regulatory process through which the specific details of the benefit will be established. This is by design. This is intentional. This approach recognizes the important role that the disability community must play in this process, as well as the complexity of existing provincial territorial disability service and support systems. But let me back up for a moment. From the onset, I have had 2 priorities in developing this benefit. First, that the disability community would be involved at every stage of the process. And second, that there would be rigor in dealing with provinces and territories to ensure that people are better off and that existing benefits and services are not clawed back. To my first priority, we've worked very closely with the disability community. The principle of nothing without us is embedded in C-22. The Accessible Canada Act requirement that persons with disabilities must be involved in the development and design of laws, policies, programs, and services is embedded in C-22. And Canada's obligation under the UN obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities are embedded in C-22. Nous avons investi 12 millions de dollars sur
We invested $12 million over 3 years in Budget 2021 to work with the disability community on the design of the proposed benefit. We did an online survey, held roundtables, and other forms of consultations. We also funded national disability organizations to engage the community directly. We will not impose upon this community, and we will not create a race to the bottom.
Canada made it clear that they don't want decisions being made without the disability community's meaningful participation. People First of Canada raised that a key principle is having people with intellectual disabilities at the table during the design stage of the benefit. Disability Without Poverty wants this legislation to pass quickly through Parliament and is eager to participate in the regulatory process so that a range of lived experiences are heard and listened to. And there are more. We've worked with the community at every step and will continue to engage, seek input from, and respond to the community through this and every subsequent phase of benefit development and delivery, including the regulatory process. Concernant ma deuxième priorité, c'est grâce
With respect to my second priority, it is through the work with the provinces and territories where the rubber hits the road on both the delivery and potential impact of this proposed benefit. C-22 recognizes the leading role that the provinces and territories play in providing supports and services to persons with disabilities. Each jurisdiction in Canada has a unique policy environment with regards to disability benefits and supports.
Overstate the complexity of the systems we're working with. There are literally 13 different provincial and territorial systems at play here, each with its own combination of supports and services. Some are grounded in legislation or regulations, others are related to program delivery. There are different definitions of disability and a variety of eligibility criteria, not only across jurisdictions, but within them as well. In some cases, eligibility for one disability program opens up access to another. In other cases, being enrolled in one disability program can exclude individuals from accessing others or reduce the benefits provided. Across jurisdictions, there's different treatment of other forms of income, different reduction rates, and different treatment of spousal or family income and support. For example, Alberta has a benefit structure focused on people with severe disabilities. Clients must be substantially limited in their ability to work, and their disabilities must qualify as likely to be permanent. The benefit dollar is significant, and couples can retain more than twice as much employment income as singles before they start to lose benefits. L'Ontario offre une aide plus vaste et moins.
Ontario provides broader, less targeted assistance. Qualifying disabilities need not be severe and can affect work, personal care, or participation in community life. The disability must be expected to last at least 1 year. Benefits are calculated on a family basis. The employment income exemption is calculated separately for each member of a couple.
To the high cost of living in the North. Eligibility is based on the ability to perform the activities of daily living. Benefit amounts cover the actual cost of low-cost shelter and utilities with no fixed cap. Employment income exemptions are household-based, and these are just 3 of the 13 we're working within here. So C-22 grants the authority to enter into agreements with provinces and territories to carry out the purposes of this Act, and that's really important. The CDB is intended to supplement existing provincial and territory support, not replace it. So within this complex ecosystem I just described, we really need to harmonize our systems to ensure that there are no clawbacks and that everyone who receives the CDB is better off. This means ensuring that income supports are not negatively impacted and that eligibility for related services and programs is not negatively impacted. We need to lift people up. We need to lift people out of poverty. Across Canada, most disability programs and income benefit amounts leave recipients well below the poverty line. The average total annual income of working-age persons with disabilities who receive social assistance is $12,600. This comes nowhere close to the national poverty line, which ranges from $19,000 to $25,000 per year, depending on where you live. I'm pleased to report that work with the provinces and territories is going well. There's an FPT work plan that all jurisdictions have agreed to. PTs are very supportive of the framework legislation approach. They appreciate and understand that there's no one-size-fits-all that will optimize the impact of this new federal benefit within the complex array of provincial territorial systems, and they share our commitment to making people better off and lifting people out of poverty. This is really important. We absolutely need flexibility in working with the provinces and territories. I'll note quickly that we're also working across the Government of Canada on federal benefit interaction. So, colleagues, we have the opportunity for once in a generation change here. With C-22, we are doing things differently on purpose. C-22 will allow us to work collaboratively with the disability community, as well as with the provinces and territories, to ensure that the benefit achieves its objective of reducing poverty amongst working-age persons with disabilities, and I'd be happy now to take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. We will now open the floor to questions, beginning with Ms. Gray. And I would again ask the members to introduce themselves before they begin the question, because not everybody can see who is with us. Ms. Gray, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Tracy Gray, Member of Parliament for Kelowna Lake Country. And thank you, Minister, for being here with us today. Minister, how much will persons with disabilities expect to receive from this legislation, and what are the goalposts that you're using?
Thank you. Really important question. So, as I explained, we are working at this stage to create the legal framework for C-22, and in subsequent stages, based on feedback from the disability and working in collaboration working in collaboration with the community and provinces and territories, the amount will be established through the regulatory process. So, our common goal, of course, is to lift people out of poverty. We know what people are getting across the country on social assistance. And we're trying to fill the gap not only between what they get in social assistance and poverty, but also in a time frame between people getting the Canada Child Benefit and the OAS GIS. So very loosely speaking, we want the benefit to be fair. We want it to be consistent across the country. We want it to be accessible.
Fair enough.
And we want it to make a real difference. So the actual amount will depend on the negotiations with provinces and territories and our ability to secure assurances around benefit interaction.
Minister, is there a ballpark that you're working towards? Are there goalposts?
Well, as I thank you. As I've said, the The benefit is modeled after the Guaranteed Income Supplement. As I've alluded to, we know what people are making generally across the country on social assistance, and we know what people get on CPPD or OAS, GIS combined, and we know what the national poverty level is. So we have a very broad ballpark on where we want to get people to, but it really matters if we, how this benefit will interact with provincial and territorial benefits in terms of how much we need to invest in order to get them there.
When will a cost analysis for the Canada Disability Benefit be completed?
We will be obviously, there's a separate budgetary process that will happen independent of the legislative process, but once we have determined all the details of the benefit, so once the amount, the eligibility criteria, the number of recipients, again, you'll hear me say this a lot, how it's going to interact with other benefits in terms of reduction rates, that kind of thing, we'll be able to provide us a very detailed cost analysis, but not until then. It would be premature.
Right. So really, the costing really can't be done, you're saying, until the regulations have been
The costing will be done during that phase, absolutely, yes.
So assuming Bill 22 becomes law, how long before persons with disabilities will receive the benefit?
Well, day one after this bill becomes law, the regulatory process begins. Our best estimate is around 12 months, but it again depends on the level of engagement with the disability community, how well and how quickly negotiations with provinces and territories go. I anticipate them to go well, based on all the work that's been done to date through officials and through ministerial conversations. But I don't know when this is going to pass, but I would estimate 12 months for regulatory process. But again, we got to make sure people are involved.
Right. So really the timeline that you're working towards then, it sounds like, is, around 12 months approximately for the regulations. You would have missed budget 2023, so then you're looking at budget 2024, which is in the spring of 2024. So realistically, just to be clear with people for expectations, you're really looking at the earliest of spring of 2024. Would that be an accurate assessment?
Potentially a little earlier than that, but I absolutely agree with your math. So in budget 2021, we invested 3 years worth of funding to get us to the benefit. So I would say you're in the ballpark. It could be in the last years of this fiscal, last months of this fiscal. I apologize.
Right, but I guess if the regulations haven't been determined, as you said, and then the costing hasn't been figured out, really, you're really not working off of anything until you have that completely done.
Right, but a 12-month timeline that starts in January of next year might end by the end of next year with a benefit delivery early in the months thereafter is what I'm suggesting.
Right.
I don't know enough to be accurate, but I'm hoping.
So you're kind of into that 2024.
Sometime in that ballpark, yes.
Where in the legislation does it address preventing clawbacks from those receiving this benefit, whatever it may be?
Well, very broadly, through the authority to grant the government, the authority to grant the government the power to enter into agreements with provinces, and that's a red line, and provinces know it.
So, but written in the bill, I know that you've said that the intention is to not have any clawbacks happen, but where would it be in the legislation right now that would give confidence to people knowing that they wouldn't have any clawbacks?
I think the challenge, you're asking for more specificity in terms of clawbacks in the legislation?
Right. You can say whatever the best of intentions are. You can say this is what we intend to do. This is what we hope will happen. This is what we're negotiating. But actually, in the legal framework, in the legislation, where is it in there that to give people confidence that in fact they will not have clawbacks based on what's in the legislation?
Yeah, so as I said, there's only the broad reference to the ability to enter into agreements, and quite frankly, the term clawback is shorthand and will be different within every province and territory, so there could be no one description that would capture the potential services, programs, supports that could be impacted. Clawback is usually referred to income support that is being taken away because your income goes up too high, but we're also dealing with a world where my bus pass, my pharmacare, my access to employment and training opportunities, assisted devices, all of that's at play here. So clawback is kind of a shorthand, but not just for income support.
It sounds
for
like there's no real guarantee,
though.
It's the intention, but there's really no guarantee.
Well, it's more than an intention. It's a red line, and I've put that in writing to provinces.
Right, but it's not in the legislation, right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuzmerchuk for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister, for joining us here at the HUMA Committee, and thank you so much for bringing forward, as you described it, once-in-a-generation legislation. It really does feel for this committee that we have the opportunity to make history here, and I wanted to thank you for that. Minister, when I look at this government's poverty reduction strategy, I look at the fact that 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty because of the Canada Child Benefit. Look at the fact that 80,000 seniors have been lifted out of poverty because of our work on GIS and OAS. And I just wanted to ask you, what impact do you see the Canada Disability Benefit having on reducing poverty in our country?
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, at its very core, that's what this bill is all about. It's about poverty reduction. It's about addressing the incredibly shameful levels of poverty within our working-age Canadians with disabilities. As I said, 23%. If done right, and that's going to be my caveat in a lot of your questions, meaning if we successfully and rigorously negotiate with provinces and territories, if the meaningful participation of the disability community is ongoing, which it will be, this benefit has the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. Like, it really will lift a significant amount of people out of poverty, like big time.
Thank you, Minister, and I guess I should begin by introducing myself as well. I do apologize. I'm Eric Kuzmierczak, the Member of Parliament for Windsor-Tecumseh. Minister, I wanted to ask you, what advantage does framework legislation provide in bringing it forward as framework legislation?
We did a lot of thinking around how we would structure this legislation, which would ultimately become law, and very early on in working towards what is now in front of us as BLC 22, we recognized fundamentally that we needed to reflect in our process, as well as in our outcomes, our commitment to Nothing Without Us, ongoing engagement with the disability community. We needed to put ourselves in a strong position, almost strategically, in dealing with the provinces and territories and the complexity of their systems and how this benefit would interact. And we wanted to find the quickest way forward, the fastest way to put money in people's hands. And that's why we determined framework legislation was the best vehicle to achieve those three outcomes.
Thank you, Minister. And you mentioned the bedrock principle of nothing without us, which really underlines all the work, all of your ministry's work and all of your work. And I wanted to ask you, this bill, as I think everyone knows by now, provides, again, the framework to establish the new benefit in law, again, leaving the details to the regulatory process. But, again, appreciating and recognizing that bedrock principle of nothing without us, how will persons with disabilities and groups that represent persons with disabilities participate in that regulatory process to ensure that their voices are heard?
Thank you. Taking a step back, we'll remember that we're not starting from scratch here. The disability community has been involved. There's been consultations, online surveys, funding to national organizations to consult with their own communities, Indigenous-led community consultation. So all that will feed in, of course, to benefit design elements. Additionally, through the regulatory process itself, there's an opportunity to do pre-publication consultation. There's an opportunity for public comments during, after the first draft of regulation. There's an opportunity to course correct if the feedback is it's not quite there yet. And we are committed, and I think we've demonstrated over the past 6 years, and I think there's a confidence within the disability community that we do consult, we do meaningfully engage, we do listen, and people do see themselves in their comments reflected in our work on the disability file.
And that really seems to be the strength of this framework legislation, is the fact that it does provide that avenue and that platform for the disability community and their voice to really be there from start to finish, including the important design phase. Is that sort of the thinking with the framework legislation?
Absolutely. It is the bedrock thinking, as you said. It's the idea that sitting across a table and hashing this all out, because it is so complex, there will be literally, I don't know, Alexis, tens, hundreds of decisions that have to be made around benefit interaction and what, I can't even, my mind just explodes when I think of it, but the best way to make sure that the voices of the disability community are heard is to sit at the table with them, get their advice, get their input, and make sure it's reflected in the regulations.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have? 1 minute? Okay, terrific. Minister, you mentioned the complexity of this space and really the diversity of the range of disability-related programs and services that are being administered by the provinces and the territories. What, if anything, have you heard on the ground from your conversations with your colleagues at the provincial and territorial levels?
Well, as I said in my speech, I think the highest level message I've received is that they appreciate the early engagement and the flexibility that framework legislation provides. The idea that we are saying to provinces and territories, you know your systems best. And within those systems, we're going to have some shared kind of principles around what this benefit. We all agree people need to be better off. We all agree that this can't negatively impact entitlement to other services and programs. And PTs appreciate having been at the table since the very beginning almost of the conception of this benefit. And they really share a common goal of making, improving outcomes for people and making people better off.
Madame Chabat, à vous la parole pour 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le
Mrs. Chabot, 6 minutes. Louise Chabot. From our riding in Quebec. Thank you, Madam Minister. Thank you for being here today and for answering our numerous questions that we have. With regards to this bill, you're correct in saying from the onset that you thank all the parties for having passed this in the House so that it can be studied here before the HUMA committee. However, and you also said in your introduction that you were clear on the objectives, and I think that we see what the objectives are, poverty reduction, and that the intention is not a race towards the bottom, but for parliamentarians who will have to vote on this bill, there's something difficult here because the main aspect of the bill, other than the objectives, will be found in the regulations. For example, 11.1, criteria for eligibility, we don't know them. The amount of the benefit or the method for calculating, we don't have this either. It will be in the regulations, and also the way that it will be calculated, the method for calculation. So for us, it's sort of a blank check if we're adopting it without having any further detail. You had C35, now C22. We know why C35 didn't go any further, but it would be important to indicate two things to us. And the first one, do you have an idea of the amount when we're talking about poverty threshold, where we should not go underneath that? You said that many people are earning $12,600 a year, and the poverty threshold varies between $19,000 and $25,000. But for you, as a department, what do you see? What would be the amount so that people can be lifted out of poverty? You must have an idea. Yes. As you said, the goal is poverty reduction. We know that there are regional differences between 19 and 25,000 for the threshold. It has to be consistent, though. People have to be receiving the same amount throughout the country. We cannot use the regional thresholds to lift people out of poverty. But if we look at what people receive on CPP disability, it's about 18 to 20,000. What people receive from OAS and GIS is 19 or 20,000. That's the ballpark number. Honestly, it really does depend on the interaction with other benefits in order to determine the exact amount. But this is the ballpark number. We know that, first of all, people with disabilities are not a homogeneous group. There are people in all kinds of different situations. Some people receive social assistance or a basic income, other amounts linked to transportation, to care, or to being accompanied and other things. So in your model here for GIS, are these amounts excluded? These extra amounts? I believe I understand. So if people receive other amounts, will it be counted as income to set out the amount? Honestly, this is the reason why we need to negotiate with each province and territory to understand how we deal with these benefits and if they are income. It's really going to depend on the situation in each province and territory and the way the services are treated. Are they treated as income or not? For example, with the GIS, we'll look at the income tax levels of the people to set out the amounts. At the last committee meeting, considering that in your objectives you want to act as a complement with the provinces in Quebec and the territories, so we asked the question, should we have, you spoke of 3 different examples of each of the provinces and their programs, but we didn't really receive an answer, and we were told that we didn't have the inventory. As members of the committee, we should have an overall picture of what is available in Canada in terms of assistance and support for people with disabilities, and this would allow us to understand the issues fully. Yes, so can we obtain this? Yes, it exists. Okay, last time it wasn't clear. So you want a description of each system, provincial and territorial systems? Yes, we will provide that. Do I have time left? No. Thank you.
Shabat, Madame Cirillo for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Benita Zarillo, and I'm from Port Moody, Coquitlam in British Columbia. Thank you so much, Minister, for coming to committee today. I know that many questions were left unanswered when we met.
Excuse me, Ms. Cirillo, your camera is not on.
Okay.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, I didn't hear it. I didn't have my earpiece in. I apologize.
Okay, begin now, and we'll start 6 minutes now, Madame Cirillo.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Benita Zarillo. I'm the Member of Parliament for Port Moody, Coquitlam. So thank you so much, Minister, for coming to the committee today, because I know last week when we had some technical briefing, there was a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of questions still left unknown. And so I guess one of the things to think about is the context in which we're having this discussion. And, you know, around us, the cost of living is soaring. And we know that rents, price of food, heating costs, all these things are rising at exponential rates. And people living with disabilities are finding it even more challenging to pay their bills and to make ends meet. So you mentioned today around 6 years. I'm going to mention that in 7 years that your government has been in power, people living with disabilities have not been able to get the help they need to put food on the table and to get security around life planning. So while grocery store CEOs right now are lining their pockets, persons with disabilities are finding themselves even more at risk. Canadians living with disabilities want to know, when will the Canada Disability Benefit reach their bank account so that they can get by?
Thank you for the question. And as I've said, partly is not presuming the duration of this parliamentary process, but assuming we get this through the House, through Senate. Day one after that, this bill becomes law. There's a regulatory process. As I've estimated, 12 months. You know, that's an estimate. The process will roll out as it rolls out. If that's the case, we are looking into 2024.
So, Minister, I'm just about the timeline. So just talking about that 12 months, we know right now that there is some talk out of provinces. Let's think about Alberta, for example, of potentially putting childcare at risk, those negotiations that happened around childcare at risk. If we're talking about a 12-month window, is it realistic to believe that that each and every province and territory will be able to get a negotiation and a commitment in 12 months?
I very strongly believe that it is. We did it with the Canada Child Benefit. This is a direct benefit to individuals. It's not a transfer to provinces. So the negotiation in childcare is not exactly a parallel. It may indicate a political climate, but as I've said, this issue seems to rise above partisanship in terms of the honest and good faith conversations that are happening now and have been happening since July of 2021, when we had our first FPT ministerial on this, where we laid out, and we kind of agreed upon a shared commitment to working through this together and individually to make people better off. So I do have confidence in that, absolutely.
And is there an opportunity then, with confidence, is there an opportunity to have that written into the bill? Because at this point in time, is there a spot in the bill that talks about timeline, that makes a commitment to the timeline?
Wrong way, sorry. In terms of like when the act will be coming into force, or when people, I'm sorry, I don't quite know what kind of timeline, because I cannot tell you when the regulatory process will start, which means I can't tell you when it will end, which means I can't guarantee a timeline beyond those parameters.
I think one of the things that people that are going to rely on this benefit, that need this benefit, like you have mentioned, hundreds and thousands of Canadians across Canada that need this benefit, a timeline at least that says, okay, with it, when regulation starts, that it'll be a 6-month window, an 8-month window, a 12-month window to end regulation. It can't be an open-ended exercise on regulation. So is there a spot in the bill where it says, once it's ready to go, the regulations need to be finalized within 6, 8, 9, 12 months?
Yeah, I don't have a sense of where that could be. And again, I feel like the regulatory process, with its complexity, I couldn't estimate confidently what that magic number of months would be. Going on my best estimate based on how other regulatory processes have gone is 12 months. But I'm not sure I would have the confidence to say that in terms of putting it in law.
Is there just talking about that, just making some sort of a timeline? I mean, I'm sure you can understand it's been very difficult for persons with disabilities that have been watching this process come along, especially since it was introduced the idea of it was introduced almost 7 years ago. And when people were expecting it last year, and now it's taken a year forward. So, I mean, I think it's only fair, and that was one of the words that you used, fair and consistent, but only fair that there be some sort of a timeline. So how could that be accommodated? How could that be addressed? How could there be an urgency embedded inside of this bill?
Listen, there's no one who wants to get this done quicker and faster than myself, and I know that's what you heard last week from officials. But we have to get it done right. We are fundamentally changing the landscape of our social safety net in Canada, and I can't imagine feeling worse than at the end of this process and realizing that somebody is not only not better off, but might be, inadvertently worse off because of this. And the complexity of these systems risks that happening if we don't, take the time to do this right, but also being mindful that there's absolute urgency. There is nothing that I am paying more attention to or care more about, and nothing, there's nothing other than this on our plate within ODI and ESDC. And I think we have set ourselves up with all the work we've done to date to be able to, day one when this becomes law, start, rigorously pursuing the regulatory process and the final negotiations with provinces and territories.
And I appreciate that.
Ms. Cirillo, your time has gone over.
Okay.
Ms. Falk for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And, Rosemary Falk, Member of Parliament for Battleford-Lloydminster out of Saskatchewan. Thank you, Minister, for taking the time to be here with us today. We know a benefit for persons with disabilities has the potential, and you've touched on this, to significantly improve the financial and overall being for many Canadians. As costs continue to soar and affordability is on everyone's mind, we know that there's even a greater financial pressure for those Canadians with a disability who already have a higher cost of living. So while there seems to be this general agreement on the stated intent of C-22, which is this legislation before us, it really is just a shell, which I would say is another word for a framework. And so all the critical details of this bill have been omitted. And it's very reminiscent, actually, of when this committee studied Bill C-81 in the 42nd Parliament. And this is when your government chose, again, to exclude any teeth from the legislation and leave it all up to the regulations. So my question, Minister, is why did you decide to exclude all the critical details from this benefit from the legislation and ultimately shield it from the scrutiny of Parliament?
Well, first of all, I would beg to differ that C-81 hasn't had a significant impact on the way this government has governed and the way law is made in this country.
Sure, but listening to when stakeholders came to committee, I recall I was here. Stakeholders were not consulted. We heard that over and over again, and we had over 200, almost 300 amendments through this committee. So, and that was from stakeholders. So I just want to make sure that consultation is being done up front, because I agree we have a once in a generation time to make a difference and just to make sure that it's done properly.
And I'm happy to provide this committee with a list of all the consultations that were done for both C-81 and C-22, because I would suggest it was the most rigorous and fulsome consultation and conversation that any government has had on disability in the history of our country.
Minister, you said at the beginning in your opening remarks that this benefit will be modeled after GIS. So I'm just wondering, how many of the GIS program eligibility parameters do you intend to apply to this disability benefit?
When I say it's modeled after GIS, the most important aspect of that is the supplemental income nature of the GIS. It's not income replacement. Of course, the GIS is its own type of benefit and doesn't need to interact in such a complex way with existing PT benefits. The OAS, it's almost as if you looked at the OAS portion in our model is being delivered by the PTs. On the GIS side, OAS is a federal benefit, so it's interacting with another federal benefit. It's not interacting with established complex PT benefit systems. You look at, I can't even think of another example, but in terms of the GIS, it's fundamentally modeled after the GIS in the sense that it will be a supplemental income.
Were there consultations done with the provinces to see how that will interact with the provinces' benefits that provincial and territorial benefits that are in each respective province and territory?
Absolutely, and they're ongoing, and they've been ongoing, and it resulted in the first instance, the first round, I would say, resulted in a work plan, an agreed upon work plan between all 14 jurisdictions, where we all agreed on the work that needed to be done to maximize benefit interaction, set out a schedule of ongoing meetings at the ADM level, the DM level, an FBT ministerial in July 2021, an upcoming one in December of 2022. Absolutely. As I said, we have to do this with the provinces, and we actually joked before this meeting, I'm worried more that the provinces and territories are going to get sick of hearing from us on this, not that they're not going to feel like they were heard. So
if there was consultation, is there any idea if there's going to be provincial or territorial clawback?
Again, the term clawbacks, I'm only hesitant because that, again, is shorthand for a bunch of different ways that a federal benefit within a provincial system could interact. So there is absolutely, I would say, consensus that people will be better off, and we have to work with each province and territory to ensure that someone doesn't lose entitlement to a peripheral, like a bus pass.
For sure,
yeah. But if by clawbacks you're meaning the bigger one,
well, I mean, in general, with anything, right? Because if it doesn't affect somebody's bus pass, that's going to make life more difficult and not easier. And you did mention this red line with the provinces and the territories. How does the federal government choose, or how is the federal government going to enforce this red line of making sure that the provinces don't do clawbacks or that type of thing. Because I come from a province where your government has railroaded my province over and over again. My province has given 2 separate, when it comes to the carbon tax plans, and it's been rejected by your government, but enforced anyway. So how do we ensure that the federal government in this aspect is going to respect the provinces and the territories and the autonomy that they have?
Well, it's been as I said earlier, from the beginning, we were committed to working from the PTs from day one. And, I've met with Minister Carr from Saskatchewan. I've got an upcoming meeting with Minister Malowski from Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan has signed on to the FPT work plan. Listen, if it doesn't work for Saskatchewan, it's not going to work for the people in that province, and we're going to make sure it does.
Exactly, just like the carbon tax. Thank you.
Time is over. Mr. Coteau for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Michael Coteau, and I represent the riding of Don Valley East in Ontario. Thank you so much, Minister, for being here today. I know that this is an exciting time, I think, for Canadians to bring forward a program of this type. And I just want to thank you for, your advocacy, not only in the House of Commons, but, even prior to coming to the House of Commons, for the work you've done. I guess my question is a bit related to the relationship between the provinces and the territories. We know that they're going to be important partners in this journey. There's no question. And many of the provinces and territories have their own suite of programs and services that they do offer. So I guess the question is, how do you ensure at the end of the day, from coast to coast, that there's going to be consistency in program delivery? Because there is such a wide variety of programs in Ontario. I know there's specific programs that may differ from other provinces. So how do you bring consistency within that kind of model?
It's a really important question, and that's why the overarching work plan is so important. It's why the kind of general principles are important, and it's why we need to work individually. We need to work kind of on a multilateral level to make sure that we're all heading in the same direction, but on a more bilateral level as we negotiate with provinces and territories benefit interaction. And for example, we may be in a world where a province looks at a federal benefit like the housing benefit or the CCB, and within their system has a list of exemptions, things they don't consider for the purpose of calculating income for the purpose of getting their benefits. And the solution in that province might be to get this on that list, on that side of the ledger. But another province might not have that list. Another province might have a different way of determining. What we managed to do, this government, very quickly coming out of the 2015 election, was negotiate that every province in the country would not consider Canada Child Benefit as income for the purpose of supports and social assistance entitlement. So we have a model, we have a precedent within the time of our government. So we're not, there's a lot of variables, but there's also strong indications, and there's a lot of hope that we will be able to get this across the finish line. I don't think there's going to be a problem doing this, but we have to do it right.
Yeah, and there's no question that this is going to impact thousands of Canadians if it does go through the process and it's approved by the House and implemented through the regulations. And obviously there's going to be so many complexities with regulation of this type. How do you make sure, if something does not work, the rollout happens a year into it, 6 months into it, something's not working. Do you have a mechanism that's in place, through your department to really look for ways to fix that as you're moving along?
Well, I think, and I'm going to ask Alexis to kind of jump in on this, but my understanding is the flexibility that is afforded through the regulatory process is going to allow us to course correct and pivot a lot easier than if we debate this in law.
And then rather coming back and changing legislation.
Exactly, right? And if it turns out that an agreement with a province didn't yield the outcomes that we thought it would, we then can negotiate just with that province and not bring all the provinces and territories to the table. I think that's...
No, I think that's a fair answer. Yeah. It's interesting because I keep listening to, there's a bunch of themes, these guiding principles that you keep talking about. For example, nothing without us, and working through regulation, through the regulatory process to develop those key pieces to ensure that the community, their voice is captured in those regulations. I think it's actually an innovative way to go about creating, a new program to service people across the country. In regards to those conversations with stakeholders, these guiding principles, these values, these themes that came up, like Nothing Without Us, were there other pieces that help guide, that are helping to guide you through this process?
Yeah. Sorry, the first and consistent message, and has been said here today, is we need this as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And we want to be involved in every stage. I believe the disability community understands the approach we've taken and the rationale behind it. I believe that we have established an amount of trust with the community, that they have confidence that there will be meaningful engagement and input received, and they will be listened to through the regulatory process. The disability community is terrified, and I use that word intentionally, of the potential for clawbacks. They're worried about the idea of a race to the bottom. If I put out a number right now, and all of a sudden provincial and territorial landscapes started changing, there would be nothing I could do. So we need to support the disability community in these and kind of validate their concerns. And they don't want to be imposed upon. Governments have done this forever. So let's work with them. This is, let's work together to get this done.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Coteau. Madame Chabot pour 2 minutes et demie.
2,5.
2.5 minutes? All right. I'm going to take the example that we all know. The guaranteed income supplement, and people who are retired. So there's a maximum amount of GIS that you can receive if, well, let's say it's $20,700. Let's say that's the maximum. But if I use my example here in Quebec, let's say that in Quebec, for people with a disability, if we look at the basic income, and I don't know, let's say they receive $24,000 a year. This is just an example for argument's sake. And let's say what is decided is a poverty threshold of $24,000. Does it mean that for the provinces, territories, that would have generous regimes, that finally it would be possible that there would be nothing extra for people with a disability? So it would be a variable. Is this what you're saying? Well, this is why we are working with the provinces and territories. In my opinion, it's not fair that if a province or territory is contributing more,
have a situation where a province has actually lifted people out of poverty, then we have to work with that province in creative ways to support other efforts on the disability file. But there is absolutely room in these conversations to I don't even know how to say it, to celebrate if a province has that level of generosity and respond to it.
Well, I'm asking the question. Mr. Chair, there's an echo. I'm hearing myself speak. I'm asking the question because we've just gone through C31 for dental care, and the check that will be sent, well, we've just gone through this in Quebec. Some people will receive zero because there's already a program. And my second question, is it possible, even if I know that everyone has good intentions, is it possible that we won't see this disability for several years? I don't understand the question exactly. Well, you said that you want to rebuild the social safety net. A lot of things remain unsolved. So the timeline could be where we pass a bill, everything has to be regulated, there's another step, and everything can fall apart. So, of course, people can be pleased that, but it's possible that it will not become a reality over the short term. I understand your concerns. we put the amount with a horizon of 3 years.
That timeline, I would suggest. All the work that we've done to date leads me to believe that we will be able to deliver on that timeline. And as we work through, I think we'll find there will be things that we thought might be a little harder that end up being easy. We all agree on, we move forward. And then we might have to work a little harder in some areas. But I remain super confident that we are going to get this past the finish line through the process we've established.
But Madame Zerillo for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to just follow back to a couple of things that the minister said. And one is I just want to make some confirmation here. So we are on a timeline. I know the technical staff last week couldn't commit to any kind of a timeline, but what I'm hearing today is that it's a 12-month timeline from when this bill begins its regulation process. So if I could just get some confirmation on that, please.
As I said, that's my best guess, but it's 12-month-ish because processes take as long as they take to get things right. But based on how long other processes have taken, that's the best number I can give you, yes.
And Minister, you mentioned that C-22 consultation was wide and vast, and I'm just wondering why that didn't make it into the bill. That's my first question, and then I have one quick question after that.
I'm sorry, I had difficulty. Why was the question?
Yes, the C-22 consultation, wider consultation.
Yep.
Why didn't that consultation make it into the bill, even around eligibility factor, which the disability community is widely agreed on in other?
I would say two quick things to that. First of all, there was a conscious choice to keep going down this path of framework legislation coupled with regulatory process on detail when we retabled the law in 2021. That was in response to a lot of the work that we've done with the community. It felt like, and I stand by the decision to keep going with that same approach, absolutely everything we have heard. Leading back to the Accessible Canada Act negotiations, quite frankly, puts us in such a great position to hit the ground running once the regulatory process. It'll all be fed in. It's being analyzed. Reports are being given to us. The community-led engagement piece is, I think the wrap-up report is next month. Yeah, so the Indigenous-led piece is ongoing. There's a lot of work going on. We are not starting from scratch, and that work will all feed into it.
Thank you, Minister. So then can I please just ask for those reports? Because we kind of had those questions last week, and technical staff was not as forthcoming that there was actually analysis done and that there's reports done. So we would like to see as much of that information in the background as we can get to make a decision around this table. Lastly, I just want to ask a question about co-creation. There's nothing without us. Where in the bill is it ensuring that co-creation will happen?
The nothing. It's in the nothing without us is in the preamble. It's baked into the Accessible Canada Act, which has a set of, I think, 9 guiding principles that the government is supposed to be implementing across law and across policy and programming and service delivery. The preamble references, as I said, the UNCRPD. One of the specific ACA principles that laws, services, programs, policies have to be developed with the community of persons with disability.
Understood, Minister. And I'm sorry I'm going to have to cut you off, but just in
Madame Zerillo,
where is the spot?
Madame Zerillo, your time has
okay, if the Minister
could
send us a written answer to where co-creation is in regulation, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Madame Gray, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, the legislation is intended for working age persons, yet working age is not defined anywhere in the bill. What is the definition of working age?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Again, that is something that it was purposely put in there to reflect the gap in support between the CCB, to which there's a disability supplement, which ends at age 18 or 19, I can never remember, I apologize, and the OAS-GIS, which starts at 65. So again, we chose the term working age Canadians because that seemed to reflect that gap.
So just for clarification's sake, though, I mean, how will that play out as you determine what the regulations are? So, you know, why not put some type of a definition in there, even if you don't have the specific ages as an example? You know, just what that actually means. Why would that be left out of the legislation? It's very confusing to people. It's a question that we get quite often, and we're not sure how to answer that. So when it's not actually in the legislation, then people will be looking to the regulations, and it just all seems very confusing to a lot of people.
I appreciate that, and my answer remains the same. We chose that term as to reflect the time space between, being a teenager, getting CCBD, and getting OAS GAS, and that was the term we chose to go with.
So is that something that will be determined as you go through the regulations then? Will that definition be coming out during the regulations?
It could be one of them, yes.
Okay. Is that something that you're committing to do? Like I said, I know it's something that's very confusing
we
to
could.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to overcommit, and I'm not meaning to be evasive, but yeah.
Right. I think a big part of this is people are looking for answers, and when we have something like this that's very that's very vague, it just it has more questions than answers to a lot of people.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to ask is, we know that this bill was previously introduced in the 43rd Parliament before your government called the snap election, and so here we are a year later, really with no further details. So over the last year, wouldn't have been the ample time to really be working on the regulations, because you might have determined things that should have been in legislation, during the course of that time. But so you're actually starting all over again here a year later. So why wasn't that work done over the last year if you knew that this was something that you were going to be reintroducing?
Yeah. Yes. Pardon me. A lot of work was done between speech from the throne in October 2020, bill tabled in June 2021, bill retabled in June 2022, massive community engagement, massive online surveys, consultations, roundtables, all will feed into the regulatory process. We're not starting anything over, and we're not starting from scratch. A decision was made to keep going with the same approach, but we are way further ahead than we were in June of 2021, way further ahead.
So I guess to tag on to that, if there was a lot of learning during that time and a lot of consultation, why would the legislation be exactly the same? You think that there would have been things that would have been learnt that would have come up saying, okay, this makes sense to put this in the legislation. I mean, the legislation is very, you use the term framework, but it's really vague in many ways, and it doesn't give a lot of comfort to people knowing what might be coming down in the regulations. So, during all of that learning, why weren't there even minor amendments that were made as you move forward with this legislation?
It's a fair question, and I would respond by saying, quite frankly, we were very confident in the approach the first time, and we are equally as confident in the approach this time. But again, we're not starting from scratch, and I wouldn't. And I'm not suggesting that you are, but I wouldn't minimize what this law is actually doing is creating in law. Legislation is creating in law this benefit. Like it's fundamentally creating an obligation to deliver this benefit and fill this really important gap in our social safety net. So it does put a stake in the ground and establish a new income supplement for hundreds of thousands of people. And I just don't think we can ever forget that that's exactly what this legislation, we're actually creating this benefit with this law.
So I go back to...
That's great.
Thank you. I go back to one of my first questions, which was, what are those stopgap measures? So, what are the goalposts that you're putting in order to give people confidence for the benefits that they'll be receiving, as you've determined likely in 2024? What are those? What are the stopgaps? What are the goalposts? What are the amounts that you're working towards as a whole for someone, regardless of what different programs they might be coming from, whether they're provincial or federal already?
As I've said, that'll all be determined through the process of regulations, whether it's based on the feedback we get with PTs on their openness on benefit interactions, whether it's the amounts and the suggestions we get from the disability community. It's how we manage interaction with other federal benefits.
Right.
The goalposts are lifting people out of poverty, making sure people are better off, and ensuring that across the country people receive a fair, consistent, and accessible experience with this
Minister,
benefit.
people don't know.
That's great.
It's
We have
still
gone
very
over.
confusing. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. For the last 5 minutes to conclude this round, Mr. Kuzmirchuk for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's Eric Kuzmirchuk, Member of Parliament, Windsor-Tecumseh. I think this was a question that was already asked previously, but I just wanted to ask Minister, why is the focus on Canadians, working age Canadians with disabilities?
Yeah, as I said, the reality is, and I said some of the poverty rates, but people between recipients who go off and fall off a cliff with the CCB disability, and then they have to wait until they get to 65 for OAS GAS, with some exceptions. There's a gap there. And that fundamentally, historically, would be the age within which Canadians work. And for very legitimate reasons, including discrimination, stigma, barriers, that's always not the case for persons with disabilities in our country. So a companion piece, of course, to the CDB is our employment strategy for persons with disabilities. So, of course, there's a whole other stream of work that's happening to remove those barriers, to build confidence in employers, to understand and celebrate the creativity and innovation and skills and expertise that this population has to offer the Canadian labour force. But in the meantime, as people continue to experience poverty, face barriers, and be discriminated against, they deserve to live in dignity.
Minister, do you have a sense, in looking at the analyses, how many Canadians could be made better off by this legislation?
As I said, it again, I'm not one to speculate, and again, that's just my style. But we know that this has the potential to lift hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty.
Going back to that bedrock principle of nothing without us, will organizations that support persons with disabilities, will they be involved in the education and the awareness part as this program is rolled out to make sure that there's uptake and all Canadians are aware of this benefit? Will they be part of that awareness and education campaign?
Absolutely, and we've heard very clearly from the disability community that that's a really important aspect of benefit delivery that they would like to take a leadership role in, so for sure.
Fantastic. Another question I just wanted to get back to, again, the sense of urgency that we all feel around this committee, and that we heard really in the House as well, too, when the bill passed unanimously at second reading, is how passing this legislation, this framework legislation, getting it through committee, getting it to back to the House for third reading, and getting through this process as soon as possible. How will this impact, or how will this help your discussions and negotiations with the various provinces and territories? Having this legislation passed and sort of in our back pocket, and how would it help your conversations with the provinces?
Well, as I said earlier, this puts a stake in the ground. This establishes a federal benefit in law, and while recognizing, again in the preamble, the important role that PTs play in the delivery of social supports and services for people with a disability, says very clearly to the provinces, as we have been saying all along, that this is happening. And we need to get to a point where we are all comfortable with how this is going to interact within your own systems, as opposed to an approach where we theoretically sit at a table and say this could happen, this might happen. If it happens, can we agree to how it might work, without having anything to lean on and show the provinces the seriousness and the immediacy of the need for figuring this all out.
Minister, is there anything else that we can do at this committee table to help make sure that we accelerate the Canada Disability benefit to the House?
Well, I listen. This is a very important part of the process, and I'm very keen to hear from the witnesses you're going to hear from the disability community. I would encourage you to test their level of comfort with this approach and their confidence that when we say we're going to have you meaningfully involved in the next phase of the process, that's going to happen, because I certainly know that there will be people who tell you they want more details and aren't comfortable with this approach, but there are many, many, many organizations that appreciate that we are not imposing on them, that we are developing this with them, and have confidence that they will be meaningful partners at the table in the next phase of this.
Mr. Kuzmierczak, and again, thank you, Minister and departmental staff, Mr. Conrad and Ms. Wilcox. This concludes the first hour of the committee's hearing on C22. We'll suspend for a few minutes while we prepare for the witnesses for the second panel. Thank you again, Madam Minister and departmental staff. An act to reduce poverty and support the financial security of persons with disabilities by establishing the Canada Disability Benefit and making a consequential amendment to the Income Tax Act. To assist the interpreters in their work, I kindly remind all members and witnesses appearing today to introduce themselves when speaking and to speak slowly. To the witness appearing virtually in the room, you may choose to speak in the official language of your choice. If interpretation services are interrupted, please get my attention and we'll suspend while it is corrected. Please wait until I recognize you before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. A reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. I would welcome our witnesses to begin our discussion with 5 minutes of opening remarks, followed by questions. The Canadian National Institute for the Blind, Thomas Simpson, Executive Director, Public Affairs, Brianna Regimbald, Program Coordinator. The Disability Without Poverty, Michelle Hewitt, Chair, Board of Directors, Rabbi Kedar, a National Director. From the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada, Julie Kellendorfer, Director, Government Relations and Advocacy, and Marie-Eve Simard, Communications and Marketing Director. We will start with Mr. Simpson for 5 minutes, please. Mr. Simpson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Thomas Simpson. I'm Executive Director of Public Affairs and Come to Work at CNIB. Joining me today is my colleague, Brianna Regimbald, coordinator with our Come to Work program. For 104 years, CNIB has been the largest organization who supports Canadians who are blind or partially sighted. We offer emotional and social support programs for those with sight loss from coast to coast to coast. CNIB is pleased to appear before HUMA today in support of Bill C-22. Our testimony represents the feedback and opinions of the sight loss community based on extensive consultation that CNIB has undertaken this year. Let me be clear. People living with a disability need the Canada Disability Benefits, and we are pleased to see legislation introduced that removes people with disabilities from poverty. Today, we will provide an overview of why people who are blind or partially sighted need this benefit and offer considerations to strengthen the legislation. I'll turn it over to my colleague. Oh, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas. My name is Brianna Regimbald, and I am the program coordinator for Come to Work at CNIB. I'm a person who lives with sight loss and have had sight loss since birth. We at Come to Work aim to support participants who are fully blind and partially sighted. In my day-to-day working with participants has brought up many barriers and concerns relating to social assistance and the low amounts holding them in impoverished state. My apologies. Throughout many aspects of my life, I have faced many challenges pertaining to educational, employment, as well as daily living activities. Many participants I speak with in the vision loss community are on social assistance and do not want to continue relying on it. The cost of living has gone up for everyone, and for people with disabilities, this has been compounded. Imagine navigating societal barriers every day because of your disability. Then imagine the compounding barriers faced by living in poverty. People with sight loss face increased costs associated with their disability, including private transportation, high-tech items that assist with independent wayfinding, and in some instances, even veterinary care for guide dogs. My hope is that this legislation passes quickly so the government can quickly work with the disability community to define eligibility criteria, a dollar amount, and establish a process with the provinces and territories to realize the intent of this Canadian disability benefit. I'm going to now turn it back over to Thomas.
Thank you, Brianna. Committee members, I ask you to consider several recommended changes to help strengthen Bill C-22. First, a Canada disability benefit must be implemented in tandem with a national employment strategy for persons with disabilities. This will ensure that the CDB does not keep people with disabilities who can work trapped on social assistance. The CDB must be designed to be a trampoline from poverty to employment rather than a net to catch people. This strategy must target employers to highlight the benefit of hiring people with disabilities, inclusive of sight loss. While seniors are eligible for OAS and GIS, disability and poverty does not magically go away at age 65. In some provinces, once an individual reaches 65, some of their provincial supports ends. For example, the guide dog benefit under ODSP, which is an extra $84 a month to help with the cost of a guide dog, ends at age 65. Seniors with sight loss in Ontario must alone cover these costs that were being subsidized. Members of this community should remove reference to age restrictions within the legislation. As Brianna and I work within our Come to Work program, we see firsthand how current and inadequate provincial and territorial disability support programs disincentivize people to find employment for fear they're going to lose their essential medical services or other benefits associated with these provincial programs. Quite simply, this legislation needs to address this and ensure that money or other benefits are not clawed back in a way that disincentivizes people who can and want to work. This legislation will confirm important elements of the CDB within regulation. CNIB recommends that the legislation be amended to require that these regulations are adopted within 1 year of the legislation coming into force to ensure no delay for the millions of Canadians waiting for this program. Finally, we believe that the Canada Child Benefit is a program for which the CDB should mirror. The Universal Child Care Benefit Act, the legislation that governs the Canada Child Benefit, spells out the amount for which the program must remit to Canadians. CNIB suggests Bill C-22 be amended to identify a mandatory minimum that people with disabilities will receive from the CDB. In conclusion, CNIB is supportive of Bill C-22. It must be passed and implemented as quickly as possible. CNIB would also publicly like to support the briefs made by the AODA Alliance and the Alliance for Equality of Blind Canadians. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson and Madame Regimbald. Now to disability without poverty. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Who is speaking?
Thank you for inviting us to speak today. My name is Michelle Hewitt, and I am the chair of Disability Without Poverty. And also with me is Rabia Hader, the National Director of Disability Without Poverty. We come before you today to talk about the Canada Disability Benefit Bill, C-22, and the need for it to reach disabled people living in poverty as quickly as possible, including Black, Indigenous, and racialized people with disabilities who are even further marginalized in our society. The statistics relating to disabled people living in poverty are appalling. There are twice as many disabled people living in poverty than those who are not disabled. This is Canada in 2022. No one deserves to live in poverty, and certainly not from the lottery of life that saw them be born with a disability or acquire one later on. Disabled people do not live in poverty because they are worthless to society. It is quite the opposite. It is because their worth is not valued. In fact, people with disabilities contribute over $47 billion to the Canadian economy. Being disabled is not cheap. Tylenol goes from a headache pill to a daily pain control medication. Our most personal daily activities, like toileting, are not free. I have a friend who waited 3 years for a replacement power wheelchair through her provincial program, only to find that the only wheelchair offer does not fit her. It's way too big. We talk about lifting disabled people out of poverty, but what does that really mean? Canada's official poverty lines use the market basket measure that fails to take disability into account. We hear the stories of disabled people living in poverty on a daily basis, as they're our friends and family. We can tell you about the man who approached Rabia in the parking lot of a grocery store, offering to swap bus tickets for food, or my friend who lives month to month with maid approved, wondering if this month will be her last because she can't afford to live. Throughout these hearings, you are going to hear many unique stories about disabled people living in poverty, but there will be a common theme. We are all united in the fact that there needs to be an end to disability poverty, and the time is now. On October the 19th, we had the honour of being in the gallery when the vote for the second reading of Bill C-22 took place in the House. It was very emotional for the 10 members of our delegation to see the unanimous vote unfold in front of us. We are here today to ask you to continue that spirit of bipartisanship, to move this bill along to third reading, for it to get unanimous support there, to pass the Senate with all speed and ultimately receive royal assent. We believe that this benefit will be most effectively delivered if the details are co-created with disabled people like us, and that collaboration cannot happen in this committee, in the House or the Senate. It can only happen in the development of regulations with disabled people as equals in that process of collaboration. Take a second, reflect on that person in your life you have crossed paths with who is disabled, and ask yourself what they need this committee to do. Right now, they need you to move this framework legislation on. Implore your parliamentary colleagues to do the right thing for disabled people by continuing that bipartisanship and moving through third reading unanimously with no further debate. Tell your colleagues on the Finance Committee that they must put money in the spring budget of 2023 to start paying this benefit out in the fall of 2023. Urge the civil servants working on the implementation of the benefit to ask themselves if the processes they create truly benefit disabled people, or are they caught up in the old ways of ableism that are so endemic in our systems. Time is of the essence. Food inflation is at 11.6%, and yet provincial disability payments are not index linked. It means that in real terms, disabled people fall further behind every day. There is yet another hard winter in front of disabled people, but you have the power to make sure that it is the last one that so many live below the poverty line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. Now to the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Julie Kelndorfer, and I, along with my colleague, Mary-Eve Samar, are here representing the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada. We are honored to present to your committee as you study Bill C-22, the Canada Disability Benefit Act. To begin, Canada has one of the highest rates of MS in the world. As an autoimmune disorder, the body mistakenly attacks its own central nervous system, disrupting the signals coming from the brain and spinal cord. No two people experience MS in the same way. Symptoms vary from loss of vision or mobility to fatigue and incontinence. While some begin experiencing the disease as a progressive decline in ability from the outset, the majority experience MS in a cycle of relapses and remissions, known as episodes. Episodic disability. Unfortunately for many, the damage from these episodes accumulates over time, resulting in permanent disability progression. Currently, we have no cure. For many, like myself, who was diagnosed 18 years ago when my son was just 1 year old, living with MS means a life of uncertainty. The uncertainty of not knowing if a symptom, like tremors in my hands when I couldn't even cut my own food at dinner, will last a day, a month, or a year, or if they will ever go away. Each day, waking up not knowing what lies ahead. The MS Society's goal is to ensure Canadians living with MS and their families can participate fully in all aspects of life despite this uncertainty. Income security is fundamental to that. We're here today to stress the urgent need for the Canada Disability Benefit Act and that it be inclusive of Canadians living with episodic disability by amending the Act to include the same definition of disability as found in the Accessible Canada Act. The effects of poverty for Canadians living with MS cannot be understated. Research on the disease has found that individuals with lower socioeconomic status were associated with a higher risk of disability progression and poorer prognosis, reaching physical disability milestones faster, like difficulty walking. Research also shows that serious economic consequences of MS begin within the first few years of diagnosis. Challenged by paying for medication, rehabilitation treatments, and transportation, living with MS is compounded by the need for services and equipment to aid lost abilities, feeding, mobility, and bathing aids. These are just some of the items needed in a list that's as lengthy as it is expensive. Imagine having to choose between heating your home and traveling to medical appointments, or buying decent food and seeing a physio to help you walk. Early intervention with life-altering disease-modifying treatments can slow or halt irreversible disability, but the cost of treatments is significant. A 2020 Conference Board of Canada report found in just 1 year, Canadians living with MS and their families paid out of pocket over $39 million. If you or your family are unable to afford treatments, your MS can get worse, making it more difficult to work and live an independent life, putting further pressure on your financial situation, leading to even worse symptoms, a downward spiral. The challenges living with MS brings, coupled with multiple barriers in current government support systems, has only been amplified during the pandemic and today's rising cost of living. And there's a gender dimension, as 75% of Canadians living with MS are women. Just as the Canada Disability Benefit targets working age Canadians, so too does MS. Most people are diagnosed between the ages of 20 and 49, prime career, family building, and earning years for people. Ray, who lives with MS, worries about his stop work day, as more than 60% of people diagnosed with MS eventually reach unemployment, which is high given their educational and vocational histories. This HUMA committee in 2019 studied the needs of Canadians with episodic disabilities, describing the income and employment context, and produced an excellent report. This committee has an important opportunity to align this act with the most current definition of disability found in the Accessible Canada Act. The MS community, alongside episodic disability partners, worked hard during the Accessible Canada Act consultations to be recognized by having episodic included in the definition of disability. It was monumental for our community. We now had a definition of disability that included us. The expectation was moving forward, all legislation and programs will explicitly contain this inclusive definition of disability. Each day, people with MS wake up to adversity and do everything in their power to persevere as they struggle to make ends meet. Let's work together to pass this legislation quickly, ease their struggle, reduce poverty, and support the financial security of working age persons with all types of disabilities, including episodic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kellen-Dolfer. Now we'll start our opening round. And before I do, just remind members again, please introduce yourself when I recognize you and clearly identify which witness you want to direct your question to. Ms. Ferrari for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everybody. I am Michelle Ferrari. I am a member of Parliament for Peterborough-Kawartha. Happy to be here, and very, very important bill that we are discussing. I'd like to start my questioning with Thomas, if I may call you Thomas. Thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you to all of you for your testimony. Michelle, yours was very powerful as well. Your points about national employment strategy really hit home. I think you're bang on a lot of what you were saying in making sure that workplaces, employers are open-minded to a lot of this. But what I really want to delve into is you referred to you're supporting this bill, you're supportive of this bill. And I think everybody is supportive of helping and doing what we need to do and doing the right thing. I think there's a fine line and trying not to be too critical, but we have to be fairly critical to ensure that it is done properly. And you made reference to the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act Alliance, AODA, and that you are supporting their recommendations. It's a fairly harsh letter, and if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a couple things and I'm going to get your feedback if that's okay. It goes on to say that, in summary, here is what is wrong with the bill as it is now written. I'm not going to read the whole thing because there's a few pages here, but I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs. The bill does not ensure that there is a swift, fair, non-bureaucratic, and accessible way for people with disabilities to apply for the Canada Disability Benefit, or a fair and swift appeal process for people who apply for it and are refused it. The bill's stated purpose is itself impoverished. It does not seek to eliminate poverty among people with disabilities. It does not even seek to significantly reduce poverty facing people with disabilities. The most tiny improvement for people with disabilities would entirely fulfill that paltry goal. And it also goes on to talk about it sets no minimum amount for the Canada Disability Benefit or start date for the government to start paying, as well as the age. How do you feel about this? And in trying to meet those timely and get it done and get this rolled out, how feasible do you think these recommendations are?
Thank you very much, Michelle, for that question. First, I'll say, of course, I believe Dave Leposki of the AOD Alliance will be joining this committee as a witness in testimony, and I'm sure he will love to answer that question as well. So, CNIB as an organization who's we like to say we're a megaphone for the voices of people with disabilities. So this brief we've come up with is not one we've had people in a room in Toronto who've just come up with. This is based on the experiences and the thoughts of people living with sight loss, people who are blind, partially sighted, or have deaf blindness. And there are folks who have a wide thoughts on the bill, saying we need the money now, get it over and done with. You people on Parliament Hill can figure it out quickly. People saying there are problems with it. I think what you'll find within our brief that will be submitted after this and as part of our testimony is that there are small tweaks that can be made for the legislation that can ensure that those things, those anxieties are overcome by certain people within the disability community, and ensure that timelines can be put into the legislation. The Accessible Canada Act, when it was being developed, put into the legislation timelines for the first regs to be developed. I don't know why we can't do the same thing here, ensuring that this is done within 1 year of coming into force of the legislation.
Thank you. Great feedback. Thank you. Michelle, if I may turn it to you, I mean, it is disturbing to put it mildly to hear you, but it's reality when you have so many people living with disabilities who are considering MAID, medical assistance in dying, instead of living. Do you want to expand on how real that is for the disabled community?
It's extremely real. I gave testimony to the MAID committee, the joint committee of the House and the Senate earlier this year. And, the friend that I mentioned, she's somebody with post-viral syndrome, basically, which as we live in this, post-COVID era, we don't know how many people are going to join that. And she's somebody that just cannot afford to pay for treatments. But we know that there are people in Ontario who have used MAID this year because their housing was toxic to them, not because they didn't want to live and not because their suffering was irremediable. The remedy to their suffering was financial. It was because they lived in poverty. So I truly believe that we're out of whack at the moment, that we have legislation by this government that is moving forward and in March of 2023 will include more people that can apply for MAID, but that's only half of the picture. We're not looking at the poverty angle and the way people are being forced to live.
How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
30 seconds.
Okay, I'll be very quick. You actually made a comment that it needs to be co-created with the disabled community. And I just was curious, we just had the minister testify. Do you not feel that the community was consulted enough on this bill?
Do you mind if I just pass? I know time's quick. If I pass to Rabia?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rabia Khudr, and I also happen to be blind, by the way, and work with people with all sorts of disabilities, including intellectual disability. The idea of co-creation goes well beyond consultation. Yes, we have been consulted as people with disabilities, as allies, as supporters for the last couple of years, and for years we've been advising and appealing to government to put in more financial supports for people with disabilities. Co-creation means that we are sitting as equal partners at the table, that people with disabilities from diverse backgrounds with diverse lived experiences are actually involved as equal partners in the spirit of equity around a table with folks from government, with bureaucrats who are actually going to nail down the regulations from design, development to implementation.
Thank you so much.
Right. Mr. Collins for 6 minutes.
Yeah, and thanks, Mr. Chairman. And it's Chad Collins, member for Hamilton East Stony Creek. And if I could start first with Mr. Simpson, if I could, through you, Mr. Chair. Part of Bill C-22 is to support the financial security of working age persons with disabilities. What does financial security look like for your constituency with CNIB?
Great question. Thank you very much. I think the reality is that if you're living with a disability, regardless of what type of disability, there's extra costs that are associated with that. Now, I'll ask my colleague Brianna a second to explain her experience as someone with the lived experience, but it does include many things, such as the extra costs to get around your community, because someone who's blind or partially sighted does not often have the ability to drive, for example. So having to take bus or an Uber or any other ride share without having support from a family member or a friend to do so, the costs of veterinary appointments, as my colleague has pointed out, for those who have a guide dog, the list goes on and on. But I'll ask Brianna to share her lived experience.
Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. As Thomas stated, there are many costs that people, often, and not to blame, but they don't think about, as we understand, with whether it be, supplies for, a guide cane, supplies for guide dogs, things like that may not be, covered by certain finances. So, for example, for myself, previously, like if I was living in an area outskirts of, for example, in the suburbs, sometimes there might not be public transportation necessarily available, or a further walk that, across the board, people with sight loss sometimes don't. There's people from partially sighted to fully blind who aren't comfortable doing certain things at different stages. So maybe someone's not comfortable walking to an accessible bus stop, so they would have to, call for a taxi to get to employment and things like that. So they're all across the board. There's many finances that aren't considered, unfortunately, and that's just based on, the knowledge of what comes with, sight loss for different people. For myself, all throughout school, there was different, resources I needed, which sometimes would cost various amounts of money. So trying to get those supports, it varies, right? So.
Thank you both for those answers. The minister was very clear that the benefit is to supplement existing provincial and territorial benefits. And Mr. Simpson, I think you referenced that in your opening in terms of the importance of ensuring that there are no clawbacks. part of our explanation today was that the legislative framework requires us now to go through the consultation with the provinces and territories to ensure that this is a top-up and we get as many people out of poverty as possible. Could you elaborate on the issue of clawbacks and the point that you made in your opening in terms of the importance of ensuring that this is topping up and as a supplement to the existing support payments that your constituency might have or already receive across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. As the minister stated earlier today, there's 13 different jurisdictions with different support programs already in place. I think that the hope of our community is some form of harmonization to ensure that, regardless of where you live across this country, from coast to coast to coast, that a person with a disability has the appropriate financial means to get ahead. This shouldn't just be about deciding what line poverty is and going $1 above that line of poverty. It should be ensuring that people with disabilities across the country are able to be economically, financially self-sustainable. And for those who are able to work, to ensure that they can get those supports to then enable themselves to go and try to thrive in employment type situations.
Thanks very much. Mr. Chair, I'm going to cede the rest of my time to my friend and colleague, Mr. Koto.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses here today. I really do appreciate you being here, and I wanted to talk to, ask a question to Reba Kadir, who thank you so much for coming to Parliament Hill the day of the vote, and I know you came to meet me with a group of individuals, and by the way, it's Michael Koto from Don Valley East. But I just want to say thank you for coming to meet with members and talking about the co-development piece. That really was one of the messages that when you left my office, it was one of those messages that stuck with me, the co-development and making sure that we stick to the general principle of nothing without us. Now, there have been members here that have suggested that, going straight into a framework that allows for the regulations to actually outline the program details and focusing on that through co-development is not the right approach, that they'd rather see it all in the legislation. Can you speak to the importance of co-development through regulation?
Again, lived experience is what will bring the knowledge, the expertise, the nuances that people in positions of power who are charged with actually developing regulations in their job descriptions and stuff wouldn't necessarily know. That is information that you can't just get out of a focus group or a consultation paper or a research paper. When you're actually sitting around the table discussing every detail as equal partners, that's where lived experience comes in. It's key. It's just like, people feeling, for example, I'm blind. Not every blind person is the same, but generally we have some common needs. We like to know who's in the room. And, when people choose to over-describe because they assume that we need to see every little detail the way they see it, that's not necessarily the approach that we need. So it's important to have the individuals at the table who have been on ODSP and know what's covered and what's not covered and how clawbacks in reality happen in their lives. Maybe, it says no clawbacks, but there's other elements of provincial supports and services that haven't been considered through research and through expert knowledge that comes with co-creation. Again, it's the spirit in which we do the work. When we do the work with that genuine mindset of nothing about us, it means including us at the table as equal partners, not just through quote unquote engagement, which is one way, and consultation, which is one way. It's about co-creating, working together. Therefore, if there are barriers, we're able to address those barriers because we live those barriers on a daily basis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coteau. Madame Chabot, pour 6 minutes.
Mrs. Chabot for 6 minutes. Thank you, and thank you so much to the witnesses for coming here to testify. Thank you for representing your groups. and yourselves as individuals, people with disabilities. I've heard the message. A lot of people say too it's important to pass the bill without amendment, and I've heard the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada speak to an amendment to include a definition that we know that multiple sclerosis can be an episodic illness. I would like for you to speak further to this. We support you. We believe that this has to be done by and for people who have a disability, but as parliamentarians, it's quite particular to pass a bill where the most important details are unknown. That is the eligibility criteria, for example, the conditions linked to the benefits and the amount of the benefit. So we've requested to at least have your point of view on the consultations, because it seems to us to be important. And also, we hear that there's an urgency to act for the benefit. We know that when it comes to regulations, this can be a long process. My question is for the Multiple Sclerosis Society of Canada. When you ask to modify something in the Act, because this is an episodic disability, what are you thinking of? Why is this important, and what is your thinking around this? What would you like to see in the Act?
Thank you very much for the question. So as I mentioned in my opening statement around the definition of disability, we were so excited during the Accessible Canada Act, both the consultations that we were a part of and in the Act itself, that the definition of disability included episodic. As this committee has also studied the episodic disabilities and produced an excellent report. Unfortunately, episodic disabilities is not understood and not included in many of the programs, and so they're left out. And so we're concerned with this act that they also will be left out. And I think there's a really important opportunity for this committee to include episodic, and there is a definition that's already inclusive. And so I think that's where we'd like to see, because we know that this intermittent connection to the workplace is very difficult, and it's very difficult to get the needed supports for people with disabilities.
Merci, on prendra le temps.
Thank you. I'm not sure if you will send a written brief to see how this can be inclusive in the Act. I have a question, only one, even if it's important that it be in the regulation. So what does it mean for you when we talk about lifting people out of poverty or reducing poverty? What would this mean? What would it mean as a minimum income so this can happen?
Merci, Madame Chabot.
Thank you for the question, Mrs. Chabot.
Given that there are 13 different provinces and jurisdictions across the country, that there are different social support programs already that exist, that the cost to exist across the country depends on where a person lives, rural, remote versus urban. I think it's far be it from me to create a number and say this is what the minimum should be. But I think this is where there can be consultation with the disability community and this committee to come up with a mandatory minimum to say that, this supplementary support program will be at minimum X that will be indexed to inflation year over year.
Thank you.
Pour d'autres réponses, non?
Any other answers from any other witnesses?
Une minute, Madame.
Si Madame Hewitt ou...
Would Mrs. Hewitt, would you like to answer this question?
The question that Thomas just responded to in relation to amount, what would lift the people out of poverty? Well, in Canada, we currently have something like 54 official poverty lines. So to lift people out of poverty presumably would be above that line. However, it costs to be disabled. And we know from research that's been done outside Canada in comparable jurisdictions like Ireland, Australia, and the UK, that for the amount that it would take for you to be eligible for something like a provincial disability program or CPPD, that's roughly 40% more. And for people who are severely disabled, it can cost 65 to 75% more. So, you know, it depends really here. Thomas mentioned before, is it $1 over the poverty line and we've lifted people out of poverty? For disabled people, that's not the actual way that we can do things. It needs to take into consideration the cost of disability.
Madame Shabat, Madame Zerillo for 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and it's Benita Zerillo. I'm the Member of Parliament for Port Moody, Coquitlam Mountain, BC, and I'm actually participating virtually today as well. I would like to I know it's a very short window, so I'm just going to get right to it around the definition, the eligibility definition. So I wonder if Madame Hewitt and also Madame Regimbald would also I would like to know from both of you if you think that the Accessible Canada Act definition would be a good base for eligibility on this benefit. Madam Ms. Hewitt, do you want to go first?
Sure. Are you okay if I pass over to Rabia as well, because she's probably more knowledgeable? I mean, following on from my good friend Julie, as somebody with MS, I mean, obviously I support everything that relates to episodic, and I just wanted to highlight what she was saying by saying that, you know, when people have any form of episodic disability and they jump in and out of a benefit system or a workplace system, it takes time for things to react. And so that's why we need special work to be done around things related to episodic. But Rabia, I pass over to you.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. This is Rabia Khudr. Again, the ACA definition is something that the disability community, national organizations extensively worked on and came to a general consensus on as a definition. Not everybody will necessarily fit into that definition, and that's why the co-creation piece is really, really key. That the ACA definition is a starting point, but let's have a more comprehensive discussion around eligibility and who qualifies as quote unquote disabled, whether episodic, temporary, or permanent, within that definition, in those conversations in the spirit of co-creation.
Thank you. And then Ms. Regimbald, would you mind just letting me know if you
Yes, of course.
How you feel about that as a eligibility definition criteria?
I definitely think it's a comprehensive definition in short, and I yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, Madam Kellendorfer, I wanted to come back to you just on around life planning and how income supports and lack of income security can affect life planning. I wonder if you could just give us a little bit of a vision of why it's so important to have stable income support in regards to life planning and how episodic can be affected by that. Episodic illness can be affected by that.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. It's, as I said, MS and episodic disability brings a life of uncertainty. So uncertainty knowing about work, family, and your path forward. You know, in a life of uncertainty, what we need is predictable supports. So predictable supports, and in particular income. Income is so fundamental to so much of life. housing, food, treatment, wellness. There are so many people we hear from that need rehabilitation supports to be able to continue as a disease like MS progresses over time, the need for supports to be able to remain as well as possible for as long as possible. We heard from a witness in the HUMA committee study. She talked about she doesn't fear losing her ability to walk. She fears losing her ability to work and contribute financially to her life. She fears poverty. And that's a really unfortunate situation. We really need to look at our very complex, as we've heard from everybody, it's a very complex system of income and disability supports. We really need to look at that from multiple perspectives over the life course. So what if I can't work, at this point in time, but perhaps if I can be supported to continue my attachment to the workforce. And that's what we really heard. People want to work, but they struggle to work. And so we need to support them for as long as possible. And I think income supports like the Canada Disability Benefit are one solution. And there's multiple solutions and there's multiple recommendations in the HUMA report on episodic disabilities that are helpful to many, including people with mental health conditions.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Chair, do I have much
30
time
seconds.
left? I'm going to ask Madam Heather, just around, persons with disabilities that are not going to work, that need to have those income supports. If you could just give me some information about the missings, the fact that the provincial government is not able to cover all of this, and why it's so important for a federal government to step in this area.
Well, essentially, for example, in Ontario, if somebody lives in a group home, they receive $1,227. The institution where they live charges them for room and board $1,075 approximately. They're left with just around $150 or so for their basic needs. With the recent 5% increase, essentially they received a $5 increase. If they do not have family to supplement their basic needs, then they are forced into a life of poverty. Again, by nothing of their, no doing of their own. Like, they were born with a genetic condition that gave them the journey of life to live with autism, with global developmental delay, with cerebral palsy, with Down syndrome, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in many cases, so severe that they don't even understand the concept of work, or simply that the nature of the disability that people have prevents them from being productive enough to earn. Everybody desires work. People with intellectual disabilities desire the need for a job. They want to be productive. However, there are barriers to employment they face, but not every barrier can be remedied or accommodated. In many cases, like I said, there are people like my late brother who did not understand the concept of work. Like my brother who lives in a group home right now, who wants to work but just cannot hold down a job due to the nature of his disability. If I'm not there, if my parents are not there, if his family is not there, he would be offered charity for his clothes, for his hygiene products, for any personal care items that he may need, because the income that he has left is insufficient. And if he did not live in a group home environment, well, he would be on the street because he wouldn't be able to afford rent.
Thank you. Now we'll conclude this afternoon's last session with 4 minutes to Mr. Aitchison and then 4 minutes to Mr. Van Bynen. Mr. Aitchison.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks everybody for all the presentations today. I find myself in a position where I understand that the public process is sometimes time-consuming on purpose, and it's important to get things right. But this is one of those areas where I hear you loud and clear that we've been talking about this for an awful long time, and it seems a little frustrating that we're still talking and not moving along quickly. maybe more quickly, I guess, is the appropriate description. I would like to just start with Thomas. You had indicated, Thomas, a couple of points that you were suggesting could improve this bill. And the one that stuck out for me, and I know it's been mentioned before, is that this must be done in conjunction with what you described as an employment strategy. And so I trust that the CNIB will in fact be presenting your suggested amendments to this. But could you speak briefly about, because we don't have a lot of time, what you mean exactly by that, and what an employment strategy might look like, what it needs to encompass?
Sure thing. Thank you very much, Mr. Edgerton. First, based on the last research that CNAB conducted, people who are blind or partially sighted have a full-time employment rate of 31%, which is quite abysmal. A full-time or an employment strategy, a national employment strategy, must be one that takes into a few things into consideration. It needs to ensure the skills development is there for people who have a disability to go into the workforce and be successful at the job that they wish to do. It needs to take into consideration the cognitive load of job seeking. What it actually means to have to compete again and again for a role, and the barrier that may create for someone who does want to become employed. But more importantly, it needs to take into consideration the cultural and attitudinal changes of employers. I don't think for many Canadians who are an employer, they actively seek out not to hire people with a disability, but I don't know that they know what they don't know, if that makes sense, the unknown barriers that they create. And so employers need to understand that a bit better, and the benefits that an individual who has a disability or blind or partially sighted, in the case of CNIB, will bring to an employment offering. Accessibility enhancements also need to be considered to ensure that people can get into their workplace, be it a ramp or those newfangled elevators, for example, where you have to press a screen that has no tactile buttons that then visually shows you which elevator to go into. If you're blind or partially sighted, and you can't even do that to get to the floor you need to get to on your first day, how are you going to be successful? So there's a number of different things that needs to be taken into consideration for a comprehensive employment strategy.
And very quickly now, because I'm down to a minute, but I'm thinking in the context of Ontario, because that's the area that I know best as a former mayor. AOTA covers, I think, an awful lot of these types of issues for employers and for accessibility and the design of public space, for example. How would the federal government fit into some of the existing provincial legislation that covers, I think, a lot of the areas that you're discussing?
So I think the federal government could do a number of different things. Public awareness campaigns are always great to try and ensure that people understand the importance of this work. Work with organizations who are doing the work to ensure that their programmatic offerings are trying to do that, whether it is skills development, whether it's mentorship for people with disabilities, or whether it's outreach to potential employers to open the doors for employment opportunities.
Okay. Well, I think I have 7 seconds, so I guess I'm done. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Aitchison. Mr. Van Bynen for the final 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate all the information that we've been receiving from this group. It certainly is eye-opening and important for us to understand. As a former mayor as well, I do know that some municipalities have the disability advisory groups for their municipalities, and I'm hoping that to some extent that could be folded into some of the programs that we have here. You mentioned earlier, though, Mr. Simpson, that we need to add, or we need to make sure that the national employment strategy complements this ability. And I know that we committed $285 million as an employment strategy for people with disabilities. Can you tell me how we might be able to bridge that into what's being proposed here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Van Bynem. So as I said, social assistance needs to be a trampoline from poverty to employment for those individuals who can and want to work. So I think to have an alignment where there are opportunities for people who are eligible for what will become this Canada Canada Disability Benefit, to also at the same time receive information on employment agencies or organizations that serve people with disabilities who have employment programming, to gather that information as well. Again, social assistance shouldn't be a net to capture people in, but should be a trampoline to help propel them to the goals and the wishes that they need.
It's a great analogy. And I believe Napoleon Bonaparte said, "He who sits in the saddle best knows where it pinches." And so your engagement in this process is truly appreciated. I will cede the balance of my time to Mr. Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Van Bynen. My name is Mike Morris. I'm the Member of Parliament for Kitchener Centre. Thanks to each of the organizations here today for your really important advocacy. Rabia shared earlier her comments about people with disabilities wanting to work. I want to just briefly share some comments from a constituent of mine who emailed over the weekend. His words were, "We should not be doomed to poverty because a rich person fears we won't work if we are aided." And I hope members of this committee keep that in mind. In terms of the work this committee will get to do, there's a chance to put forward amendments, and I wanted to ask of CNIB folks in particular, one of the amendments you'd suggested was about requiring regulations to come into force within a particular amount of time. Could you share more about what you envision with that particular amendment?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Morris, for that. As I shared earlier, while HUMA in Bill C-81 was studying the legislation, the disability community sought out timelines for which regulations would be developed. And I think it's very apt here that we learn from the same success. I think the minister spoke today of her wish for the regulations to be done within a year. Why not legislate that within the legislative framework that is here in front of you as Bill C-22? I'm no lawyer. I'm sure you guys can figure out where it fits properly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would any of the other witnesses want to share about any proposed amendments related to the timeliness? We've heard from so many from the disability community about the urgency they're looking to see parliamentarians move with. Would either Ms. Kellendorfer or either of the folks from Disability Without Poverty want to share about amendments with respect to the timeliness of the bill?
Please.
I'd just like to say that we need to think about the timeliness of this in terms of the crisis that this is for disabled people. We've done so many things in the last 2 years that we never thought we were going to have to do. We've rolled out a whole vaccination program. We've rolled out various benefits. We can do this. We have the capacity as a country to roll out this benefit to disabled people in less than a year if we all believe that it's the national crisis that disabled people who live in poverty see it as. So whether that's an amendment or whether that's my words just saying things need to move, I'll leave it there.
And I will echo Michelle's sentiment. It's Rabia from Disability Without Poverty that where there's a will, there's a way. One story of a disabled person living in poverty represents and reflects thousands of untold stories. We don't need to consult more. We don't need to hear more. We need to roll up our sleeves and get the job done, deliver the money to the people that need it most, and it will stimulate our economy at the same time. Let's not forget. We all need this benefit to flow quickly.
One final, Madame Kellendorfer.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. I think it's exactly what Michelle and Rabia said. Our community wants us to prioritize this legislation as quickly as possible. The urgency is there, and we need it yesterday. So whatever we can do to ensure that it moves quickly as possible is what our community is asking for. Thank you.
Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon. And is it the pleasure of the committee to adjourn? Adjourned.